Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a source you've sent us and really dig into it, pull out the key stuff you need to know pretty quickly. So today we've got this really interesting PDF you shared. It's titled Episode 223, Softness.pdf.
Right.
And inside there's an essay, The Shape of Softness, a Feminist Unseen.
Yeah, and this one's by Jaime Hoerricks, who holds a PhD. And it's a really deep exploration of femmeness, specifically through what they call a neuroqueer perspective.
Neuroqueer, okay.
Yeah, and the core idea really revolves around this word softness. But importantly, not softness as, weakness or being fragile. It's more about a kind of fundamental fluidity and using that as a way to resist a world that, often demands we harden up.
That's a fascinating frame.
It really is. And what's quite poignant is that James writing this about a year after they first came out, using only that single word, softness.
Just that one word. Wow.
Just that word.
And they actually start the essay talking about that exact moment, don't they? Coming out to their wife.
Yeah.
And then having this difficulty, like finding the language to explain what softness truly meant for them.
Exactly. They mentioned being a gestalt language processor.
Right.
Which, can mean understanding things in bigger chunks, maybe more sensorially first. So in that huge emotional moment, the knowing was there deep inside.
But the words just weren't quite lining up yet, that internal sensory grasp before the language.
Precisely. So that's really our mission for this deep dive, isn't it?
Let's unpack it.
Let's figure out what Jaime Hoerricks really intended with softness. How does that one word connect up to this whole idea of femness as a neuroqueer strategy for being?
And moving beyond those maybe simplistic standard Western ideas of what softness is supposed to be.
Absolutely. That's the goal.
Okay, so let's dive into softness itself then, because like you said, Jaime immediately flags the problem with the word.
The baggage it carries.
Yeah, in Western culture, it's so often tangled up with negative stuff, right? Weakness, passivity.
Being easily broken.
Definitely. And feminized, but in a really reductive, kind of limiting way.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. So the first insight for us, I think, is recognizing that the common usage of softness is loaded with things Jaime's actively trying to push against.
Right. They're redefining it from the jump.
They really are. They state very clearly that their meaning is completely different. It's rooted in something else entirely.
Which is?
Movement, flow.
Yeah.
And specifically, their training in Tai Qi and Qigong. Years of it.
Ah, okay. So that martial arts connection is key.
It seems fundamental. Which brings us to that Tai Qi analogy they use.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, they describe softness not as just, giving way or collapsing under pressure.
No.
It's about being incredibly responsive, really present, rooted, actually, but still able to redirect energy or force.
So yielding without giving way. Flowing, but not getting swept away.
Exactly. Flowing, but never unmoored. There's a profound strength in that, isn't there?
Definitely. It's a strength that doesn't rely on domination or overpowering something.
Precisely. So the big insight here is that softness, for Jaime, isn't fragility. It's a deep inherent strength that allows for flexibility, for redirection. Think less delicate flower.
Or like that willow branch that bends in the storm but doesn't snap.
Exactly like that. Unbreakable willow is a great way to put it.
Okay.
And from that place, from that understanding, they build their idea of femness as softness in motion.
Softness in motion. I like that.
Yeah, it's not abstract. It's embodied. It takes discipline, they say, practice.
Yeah.
And it's deeply relational.
Relational how?
In terms of how you actually meet the world, how you interact. It's choosing flow, adaptability, instead of, say, rigid armor.
Okay. And the goal isn't necessarily to win in a confrontational sense.
It's more about enduring, staying true to yourself, navigating things without having to become hard or aggressive.
That leads nicely into the next point they make about feminist moving beyond just performance, right?
Yes, this is crucial. They talk about unlearning this really deep-seated cultural idea that your feminist somehow needs outside eyes on it.
Like it needs to be seen and validated, particularly by the Sashitaro gaze, as they put it, to even be real.
That pressure for external approval. Have you ever felt that need for someone else to confirm something so internal?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very common pressure, I think.
And Jaime connects this back to some of their earlier writing. They mention a piece called The Struggle is Real.
Okay.
And in that, they explored feeling unseen, or like they didn't quite belong in spaces that centered more, let's say, conventional or expected gender expressions.
A sense of alienation.
Yeah, real disconnect they were trying to articulate.
So what feels different in this essay, then? What's the shift?
Well, it feels like a deliberate turning away from chasing that visibility
Okay.
and turning towards just living in their own truth. Feminine becomes less about how you look and more about how you are.
Like a quiet refusal.
Exactly. A
Yeah.
quiet refusal of those imposed scripts, a commitment to softness as a stance, an internal orientation, not just, an external decoration.
So femness as an internal compass, not an outward show. That's a really key takeaway here.
It really is. For Jaime, it's not about twisting themselves to fit some narrow box labeled womanly.
No.
It's about actively resisting dynamics of domination, refusing simple compliance, and pushing back against that constant pressure to harden up emotionally just to get by.
It's defined from the inside out.
Totally. A self-defined experience.
And the role of martial arts in all this seems absolutely central. They mention a past with brute strength, anger, and violence.
Yeah, quite a contrast. But they also say even then, there was this underlying longing for flow, for pattern, for coherence.
Like two opposing forces were always there.
Kind of. And what's so interesting is how the journey went from things like street fighting and wrestling.
More aggressive forms.
Right. Towards Tai Qi and Qigong. More internal, flowing practices. And that shift was apparently revelatory.
How so?
It revealed what they call the intelligence of flow, this ability to meet force without becoming force yourself.
Yielding without collapsing. Adapting without losing yourself.
Exactly. That's the intelligence they found.
And they connect this to being an autistic gestalt language processor. You mentioned that earlier, understanding things in chunks, maybe more intuitively.
Right. And for Jaime, the movements, the patterns in martial arts felt more natural, more communicative somehow than just words.
Like a different kind of language.
Almost, yeah. A nonverbal way of understanding and navigating. They even call these practices survival strategies.
Wow.
And a form of autistic communication, which is such a powerful framing.
It really is.
And they use those metaphors, water wearing down stone.
Yeah, over time.
Bamboo bending in the wind.
Resilient.
Wind reshaping landscapes. All examples of this soft but incredibly persistent strength.
Which they now see as their femness. It's about presence, not presentation.
Exactly. That's the core of it.
And they bring in yin and yang from Tai Qi too, right? To explain this further.
They do. And it's key because yin, softness, often culturally linked to feminine.
Is often seen as lesser, weaker than yang, strength, the masculine.
Right. But in Tai Qi, they aren't hierarchical like that. They're interdependent. You need both.
Ah, okay.
So Jaime's commitment to softness isn't about lacking strength. It's about embodying a differently shaped strength.
What shape is that then?
Relational, rooted, patient. It honors connection over conquest. It's about maybe learning to flow with challenges, finding that inner resilience to stay grounded even when things are shaky.
That makes a lot of sense. Which leads us to this idea of femness as a neuroqueer strategy. Can you unpack neuroqueer a bit more?
Sure. It's often used by people who see their neurodivergence, like autism or ADHD, and their queerness, in terms of gender or sexuality, as interconnected, as influencing each other.
Okay.
So for Jaime, their feminist isn't an imitation of something else. It feels inherent, authentic. A neuroqueer way of relating to the world that stems from how they sense and flow, not just how they might look.
So their autistic experience isn't separate from their femness, it actually informs it.
Deeply informs it, yes. They talk about autistic sensitivities to light, sound, movement, subtle energy shifts, and how these actually help them perceive relational patterns, knowing when to yield, when to stand firm, when to root down.
That's a really positive reframing of sensitivities that are often seen negatively.
It absolutely is. And they do the same with other autistic traits like flow states, echolalia, scripting, repetition.
Things often labeled as maladaptive.
Right. But Jaime sees them differently, as movements of relationality, ways of holding meaning, gestures of softness even, seeking resonance.
Seeking connection through those patterns.
Exactly. And again, the emphasis is that this feminist isn't about conquest or making others conform.
It's about being present without being lost.
Beautifully put, yes. Refusing to harden, living through movement and flow.
So pulling it all together, this softness is actually quite resistant. It's not passive at all.
Not at all. It's active. They frame feminist itself as a kind of political orientation towards this disciplined relational softness, like Tai Qi.
Resisting hardness with rooted intention.
Precisely. actively pushing back against the rigidity the world often imposes.
Do they give examples of how this looks in practice?
Yeah, they do. In their teaching, they talk about using scaffolds, support structures, rather than just commands.
Okay, more collaborative.
Right. Their writing style, layered,
Yeah.
sensory, kind of circling towards truths rather than stating them bluntly. And in how they move through the world, attuned to those subtle shifts, prioritizing presence.
But it's not all softness, is it? They mention needing something harder sometimes.
Yes, that's a really important nuance. The seed of something harder. That yin contains yang idea again.
Right.
There are moments that demand firmness, setting boundaries, asserting rights.
And that's not a contradiction.
No, they frame it as essential. Those moments of firmness aren't a betrayal of softness. They're its guardians. They protect the space for softness to exist.
Okay, that makes sense. It protects the flow.
Exactly. And then they return to those powerful metaphors.
The river carving canyons.
Bamboo surviving storms.
Wind shaping the earth.
Yeah. To really drive home that enduring, transformative strength within softness and asserting that this way of being is valid, deeply powerful, even if it's misunderstood or misread by others.
It doesn't need external validation.
Doesn't need it at all.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive has really shown Jaime Hoerricks' journey to understand their own softness as this, well, powerful, resistant, neuroqueer form of femmeness.
Yeah, moving way beyond the usual definitions and expectations.
And the key themes that kept coming up were, what? Embodied experience.
Definitely. How it feels in the body. The power of flow, resilience.
Adaptability.
And prioritizing that internal truth over any kind of external validation. That seemed paramount.
Yeah, and it was really striking how they reflected on just starting with that one word, softness, and how its meaning unfolded over time for them.
It really speaks to that gestalt processing, perhaps. That deep knowing can be there, completely valid.
Even if the language takes time to catch up, it doesn't make the knowing less real.
Not at all. Which makes their final statement so impactful.
Can you remind us of that?
Yeah, they say. This femmeness, this fluid, disciplined, neuroqueer way of being, is not a performance. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. It doesn't need to be approved to be true. It flows, it bends, it yields, and it endures. Like water, like wind, like me.
Oh, wow. That lands powerfully.
It really does.
So it leaves us, and you listening, with maybe a final thought to mull over, where in your own life might embracing a different kind of softness, one based on resilience and flow, not rigidity, actually offer some unexpected strength, or maybe just a more authentic way to be.
That's a great question. Maybe thinking about how you might already be living that kind of softness.
Yeah, in ways you just haven't put a name to yet. Definitely something rich to reflect on.